From this moment on, unless they have infiltrated the jury and have a plant in that deliberation room, which is not impossible, because they will try, I have no doubt. They will try to tamper with the jury because these people are desperate and it is a sinking ship. The ship is sinking and desperate times call for desperate measures. Make no mistake. Don't be surprised if tomorrow or the next day, Hank Brennan comes in with a motion to get rid of a couple of the jurors because somebody heard them out at the bar talking about the case. Guaranteed. In fact, he's probably got a team of people right now at home stalking their Facebook and social media accounts to make sure that they're not engaging in misconduct or that they don't have friends on their Facebook wall that they're close to that are following the case or posting about free Karen Reed. You watch. This ship is sinking and Hank Brennan is desperate. It's going to get ugly. But the jury does not like this man. I'm telling you, it is not possible. You know why it's not possible? Because he is the most unlikable person the world has ever seen. And anything that happens from this point on, one teeny little wrong move for Hank Brennan, and this ship is sunk. It is done. It's a done deal. That jury will come out in 2 hours. We're out of here. We want no part of this anymore. I don't give a shit about Peg O'Keefe. I don't give a shit about the family. I don't give a shit about Karen Reed. I never want to see Hank Brennan again. I want to get as far away from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts as I can.
Your Honor, my brief review of the lab paperwork and looking at the hoodie, it appears that I made a mistake.
Today was the perfect example, the epitome of what exemplifies the corruption, the egregious, nefarious, utter misconduct, soup to nuts, by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and the so-called judge in this case, Beverly Cannoni, who I will no longer refer to as a judge because in my mind, a judge is someone who deserves power, and this woman does not.
And while she's pulling that up, is there a difference between, see that's how that's blue? You see that's medium?
Yes.
So the blue ones you use to test A and B, correct?
Correct.
The smaller crash test dummy than Mr. O'Keefe, the 5'9" crash test dummy, yes?
Correct.
And then when you use Randy and brought him into the scene, you used the extra large, the gray one.
Correct.
Right, so you used a different one because it was a smaller anatomical doll than the size of Mr. O'Keefe, yes?
We used different sizes. The material blend was the same.
You were asked by Mr. Brennan, give me one name, very dramatically, of someone.
Objection. The objection sustained.
You were asked to give me one name to support using a 50 percentile hybrid 3 in testing forces on a 216-pound man. Do you remember that question?
Yes.
How about the name Judson Welcher? How about that name?
So the objection sustained.
Did Judson Welcher use a 50 percentile hybrid in his drop test?
Objection. So that's sustained as to form.
What did Judson Welcher use in his drop test?
A hybrid 3 50th percentile male, the same that we use in our testing.
You can't make it up.
Do you know what this is, doctor? Did you see this picture in your analysis?
Don't know if I recall that specific photograph.
Do you know this is taillight shards found in Mr. O'Keefe's clothing?
Objection.
Sustained.
Did you consider this photograph during your analysis before you gave your opinions regarding cuts and tears and lacerations?
No, sir.
You can take that down, please.
Mr. Brennan just asked you if you made note of these little red pieces, correct?
Correct.
Do you have any idea the size of those pieces? As you sit here.
Not without a scale of some sort, no.
So as you sit here, do you have any idea what the size of those pieces are?
I couldn't tell you as I sit here today, no.
No idea if they're a foot long?
Objection. So the objection sustained.
You were asked, when shown this picture, if you accounted for this in terms of damage to the garment, the sweatshirt, right?
Correct.
What if I told you those were?
Objection.
So the objection's sustained. He said he doesn't know the sizes. That's the end of that, Mr. Jackson.
I realize he said he doesn't know. He was
That's
asked
the
questions.
end of that, Mr. Jackson.
Do you see that 10?
Yes.
Are you aware that all those pieces are inside that tin?
Sustained, and jurors disregard that.
Did you ever see this tin in your analysis?
I do recall seeing, yes, in the evidence photographs of all the fragments, yes.
In your experience, are very large pieces or very small pieces put in little tins about 2 inches wide?
Sustained.
Take a look at the back. You see other holes on the back of Mr. O'Keefe's sweatshirt?
It appears I see one hole.
Let me get a little closer so you can get a better look. I'll direct you to here. Do you see more than one hole in the back of Mr. O'Keefe's sweatshirt?
Yes.
When you were forming your opinions that the collision would be inconsistent to damage to Mr. O'Keefe's sweatshirt, did you consider that Mr. O'Keefe may have fallen or landed on his back?
Well, in looking at those holes, they're inconsistent with road rash. And again, to get those kind of holes, you have to have prolonged sliding contact on a rough surface.
Here is the basis for the mistrial with prejudice. Those holes in the back of the hoodie sweatshirt are clearly, unequivocally, without doubt, caused nothing to do with any type of event on or about January 29, 2022. I will note Exhibit YYY. This is the one that it clearly shows the hoodie before the criminalist started her work with the cuts. There are no cuts to YYY, and if we need to, we'll bring Ms. Hartnett in to confirm.
All right, so is ZZZ in evidence?
ZZZ is not in evidence, and that is part of the basis for the mistrial.
All right, jurors, that's the back of the sweatshirt that was shown to Dr. Wolf. Okay, thank you. Why don't you go ahead and put it back in the bag? So, jurors, I instruct you that those holes were made by the criminalist, Ms. Harnett, during the course of her inspection and sampling of the sweatshirt back on May 18th, 2023. Okay?
God save the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
Welcome. This is the I Don't Belong Here show, and I am your host, Samantha Benigno. I am a behavioral scientist, a career psychotherapist, a 6-year PhD candidate in clinical psychology, a master's level psychologist and counselor, and I am here breaking down, as you know, the Karen Read case. You guys know how I feel about the judge already, okay? You know that I believe that she is beyond bias, that I think it's very personal for her, that I think she wants to make it clear to the big shot attorneys like Robert Alessi and Alan Jackson that this is her courtroom and that they are not going to boss her around in her courtroom. That's number one. But number two, and make no mistake, and I've never wavered on this, there is an incentive. I don't know what it is. I don't know if she's being bribed. I don't know if it is, maybe it has to do with this Person of the Year award. I don't know what the financial incentives are, but make no mistake that she's being incentivized to ruin herself and her career because this is not an inherently stupid person, okay? You don't become a judge by being an idiot. Like, it's not possible, right? You work hard, and clearly she has, and you get the reward. You get the power. But the problem with power, and obviously this is true in Norfolk County, these people believe that they are the God Almighty. They believe that they are the burden bearers of justice, and they get to decide who is guilty and who isn't. And from the very beginning, in this case, the powers that be, Michael Morrissey, the district attorney's office, the Boston Police Department, these people were very clear about what they were going to do to remedy the John O'Keefe situation. What is that situation? A Boston police officer was found dead on the lawn of another Boston police officer. And much like Michael Proctor's buddies, very quickly, within hours of the investigation beginning, very quickly realized this is not good for the Boston Police Department. This is a PR nightmare. We can't have that. No, no, no. And everybody then goes to great lengths to protect not John O'Keefe, but Brian Albert. And the Albert family, and the Albert family name, Colin Albert. And as this trial progresses, what we now know for sure, and today, finally, at least Hank Brennan got called out for it. At least the jury now knows that it is unequivocal. This guy is a scumbag, a grade A scumbag. And that the judge and Hank know that they are losing. They know the ship is sinking. They know they have no evidence. And I don't think that Hank planned for Dr. Russell to give the jury a rationale for the "I hit him" statements. I don't think that one Hank saw coming, but let me tell you, that may end up being the single most important moment in this jury when all is said and done. It's not that they needed some technical diagnosis, some official, right? Oh, that's prolonged grief disorder, or, PTSD, or, oh, it's a grief response. They just needed one tiny second, a tiny second of awareness that, oh yeah, people do blame themselves when they lose a loved one. Oh yeah, I did have a friend once. Oh yeah. Actually, come to think of it, friend's sister's cousin knew somebody who commits suicide, and I remember her roommate thinking it was all her fault. Dr. Marie Russell took the biggest stick that she could find and stuck it so far up Hank's rear end that he still can't sit down now. And today, he was gunning for Dan Wolf. He came out guns blazing. And he debated. There's a reason why this little stunt with the hoodie was saved for last, because he wasn't sure if he was going to do it. He waited until the very end because he wasn't sure if he was going to do it. But he said, you know what? Screw it. Why not? What do I have to lose? What's the worst that could happen? I've gotten away with countless infractions of similar caliber all the way through. The countless moments where, for example, he doesn't call the DNA expert to say that there was no dog DNA, but he drops it anyway, and then the judge lets him get away with it, right? Or how many times has Hank Brennan cross-examined witnesses for things that his witnesses are doing, accusing the defense for bullying witnesses into testifying. And yet Hank Brennan has Brian Tully picking up witnesses at the airport. Brian Tully. He's got Brian Tully sitting with firefighter Nuttall, going over their testimony. You don't think that that's an intentional stunt to try to bully witnesses? The constant gaslighting, the fact that in the last 2 days, how many times has Hank Brennan gotten all over Dan Wolf about the arm size, it being, using a 9.3 pound arm instead of an 11-pound arm? How many times bringing up the very minor minutia distinctions about the crash test dummies, only to find out that, oh yeah, that's the same one that my crash reconstructionist team used too. And this is that he has been pulling all along. But there's a difference now. The difference now is he's in a sinking ship and he knows it. And so does the judge. And that little comment that she said today about the jury, about how they've had enough. You know what they've had enough of? I guarantee you this. I guarantee it. They have had enough of Hank Brennan. Because just like you and I are sitting and having a crazy reaction to this man cross-examining Dan Wolf, where every part of your body feels sick, you feel like you're going to vomit, you feel like you're going to cry, you feel like you're going to scream. Well, you and I, we can get up and walk away. I can, get some work done, actually meet with clients, go outside, take a walk, do whatever, put in my earbuds and go do something, listen to it that way. But the jury can't do that. The jury has to sit right there and just tough it out while this piece of garbage shreds all of the defense witnesses who, have you noticed, never get defensive when they absolutely should bark back. They don't. They just take it. They just endure it because they are professionals, because they are grade A professionals. From Matthew DeSogra, who was a tremendous witness for the defense, and he'll be one most people don't even remember. But for the first witness, after going through days with Judd Welcher, who's just slimy, like you have to take a shower after listening to this guy, just such a piece of shit. As a human being, just a bad person. And then you have DeSogra, who's kind of like fuck is wrong with this guy? Like, he could not stand Hank Brennan. He just, by the end of it, he was just like, oh, get me out of here. You could, this poor man, you could really see it on him. I hope the defense is at least giving them a heads up somehow. Like, listen, this is a bad guy. Just, hope you're ready. Hope you're ready for this piece of garbage human being who's about to cross-examine you way too long to try to find some weakness, try to make you feel bad somehow. That's what he's going to do. He's going to try to find something to destroy you on. And then has the audacity to file motions against the defense for calling out Burgess for lying about his resume. They actually filed a motion on that, a legitimate motion, wanting to reprimand the defense. Like, is this guy serious? Serious? No, it is. This is a bad person. Now Hank Brennan is losing, and he's like a petulant child. Now he's having a nervous breakdown, and we're seeing it. What is the whole thing about every time somebody moves or looks him the wrong way, he stops what he's doing and he glares at them for 10 seconds, shoots them dirty looks in the courtroom? But now the judge also knows that they are losing, and that Hank is losing, and that Hank is losing it. And so she's got to even out the playing field by making sure that no fatal blows come to the Commonwealth down this home stretch. That's exactly why all of her motions today were designed not to allow that last big blow. That's the common denominator. If you're looking for some rhyme or reason to the judge's motions, well, look no further, because there aren't any. The only rhyme or reason is, how do I block and tackle against the defense so that the Commonwealth doesn't look as egregiously horrific as they are, so that I can hide from the jury and the world the fact that there is no evidence of an accident. None. Oh, but there is evidence of planting taillight. Lots of evidence of that. Oh, and there is evidence of John O'Keefe having a head injury in the garage, which just so happens to be like 84 feet from just south of the mailbox. Let's assume that Brian Higgins' Jeep was parked right in front of that mailbox. If Karen Reed had parked right in front of the Jeep and John walked across the lawn and straight into the garage, it would have been approximately 84 feet. That's what we learned today from the detective who eventually testified for the defense, but was not allowed to show the blood evidence photos on the steps in the garage that their detectives took. Because according to Hank Brennan, that's prejudicial.
Argue that any time there's exculpatory evidence or a case that advances the defense theory, that's by definition going to prejudice the Commonwealth's case.
Amen.
This is not unfair prejudice. Mr. Brennan is allowed to cross-examine this witness and to make whatever arguments he wants to make about the likelihood of the garage being involved or not. But he does not and should not get the benefit of the fact that his investigation, the police investigation, didn't do what we just did. And this evidence should be admitted.
You gotta love Yannetti. Love David Yannetti. I even think the judge likes David Yannetti. That's like, I'm sorry, of a so-called judge, Beverly Canone, because I refused to recognize somebody just because they've been given a title that they clearly do not deserve. And now she is hiding things from the jury. You know, she has the audacity on a number of occasions to admonish the defense team for their mendacity, to use Alessi's word, which I love. It's my new favorite word. for being dishonest or I have grave concerns. Are you kidding me? And this little stunt with Hank today acting like he didn't know, he made a mistake, that the cuts in the back of the hoodie didn't come from the criminalist. Well, you can add that to the very long list of discovery violations, mirrored videos, missing ring footage, lying to the judge. And the thing that I think is really hard for people to understand, because they look at the so-called judge in her black robe and sitting there like she's the king of her domain. And they think, oh, well, that's supposed to be a professional human being. But honestly, she is no different than Michael Proctor. She's exactly the same. They are the same, which is no different from Adam Lally, who, by the way, has flown under the radar because that is the one thing, the one skill that he masters and counts on to get away with being the world's scumbag slimeball sidekick. But that is what he is. Adam Lally is a grade A scumbag, but because he's so meek and pathetic, he gets away with it. Everybody just projects onto him that he's a nothing, nobody, loser who can do no harm. Except that I don't buy that for a second. I think he is a grade A scumbag, just like Hank Brennan, and was doing things just like Hank Brennan in the last trial, things just like this.
So what prosecutor interviews Barrows and says, tell me what you saw? And let's assume he says, I saw a crack. And they say, well, can you describe it? It is impossible to me that Adam Lally would not show him a picture. I'm talking a year ago or more. The famous picture. Did it look like this? Now let's assume Barrows says, no way. No, it just had that one little dollar bill size piece. That's Brady material. That is as exculpatory gets. None of that is ever disclosed to the defense. So now presumably Lally is aware of this. He calls him at trial and on direct, and he probably calls Barrows, by the way, so the defense doesn't, because he knows, and again, the defense would be hedging by cross-examining him, not knowing what he would say. So on direct, he says,
and what, if any, observations did you make to the rear area of that vehicle specifically?
At first, I did not go up to the vehicle. I just remained at the driveway and waited for the troopers to come back. And once they came back, they were let into the house through the garage. I had walked in with them briefly and then went back out to the garage and remained with the vehicle.
And as far as at any point in time, did you have any conversation with anyone named Karen Reed that day while you were at the house?
I did not.
Now, with respect to you come back out to the garage, is that correct?
Correct.
And the troopers are inside the house, is that also correct?
Correct.
Now, at some point, do other vehicles come down to the driveway area of this residence that you were at?
I had contacted the highway superintendent after speaking with the troopers about how to retrieve the vehicle since the driveway was untouched and had about a foot of snow. I had made the decision that I would call the highway superintendent and see if that he would come and plow the driveway so that the tow truck would have access inside in the driveway.
And just in reference to this driveway, just if you could, not exact footage or anything, but how close is this Lexus SUV parked in relation to the roadway? How long is that driveway?
It's got to be about 150 feet off the roadway, if not more.
And if you recall, from where you're standing at the point of the garage, was what part of the vehicle was facing you? Was it the front of the vehicle, the back of the vehicle, the side of the vehicle? If you know?
I was looking at the left side of the vehicle.
And at some point, did you make any observations of the right rear part of that Lexus SUV?
I did.
And what, if anything, did you observe about that area of the vehicle?
I saw that there was some damage to the right rear taillight. To my best ability and recollection, that taillight was not completely damaged. It was cracked, and a piece was missing, but not completely damaged.
And then beyond the taillight area of that vehicle, what, if anything else, did you observe as far as damage to the rear passenger side area?
Like a dent on the rear quarter.
And as far as the dent on the rear quarter panel that you saw, was that above the taillight, below the taillight, or something?
It's probably right in conjunction with the taillight in that same area.
And from the time that you made these observations of the vehicle, at any point did you go sort of physically up to the vehicle?
I walked up to the vehicle, correct.
And about how far away from the vehicle did you get?
5 to 10 feet away.
And as far as the sort of outside or exterior of the vehicle, you mentioned obviously there's about a foot of snow on the ground. What, if anything, precipitation-wise or weather-wise, was around or on the outside of the vehicle?
Just snow.
And in particular, in this area of the right rear passenger side on that taillight, was there any snow or ice or anything around that area that you observed?
On the vehicle itself?
Yes.
Yes, on the vehicle there was snow on the vehicle.
And not to put words in your mouth, but sort of caked on there, is that correct?
I guess you could say caked on, correct.
Note the several ways that Adam Lally tries to skirt around the fact that the taillight was cracked, but not completely broken, not completely shattered. He even goes as far as to try to insinuate that somehow the snow being caked on the car might be responsible for why he must have seen something that wasn't really the way it was, right? I mean, at least that's clearly Lally's intention in asking about the snow being caked onto the car. How slimy is that? Let's take a listen to how that first testimony last year differs from this testimony just a few days ago.
Can you describe for the jurors what you noted in terms of the damage to the right rear taillight?
I noted that the report said that there was right rear damage to that taillight.
When you say damage, have you ever described that damage previously?
I have.
Can you tell us what that description is?
There was, it was damaged, the taillight was damaged, but there was a crack missing, but it was not completely damaged.
When you say there was a crack, do you mean there was a piece missing?
A piece was missing.
Can you describe for the jurors kind of what that piece looked like, how big it was, how small, the shape, as you call it?
The piece was about maybe this big.
Is that maybe the size of a dollar bill, maybe 6 inches?
6 inches.
And how wide?
Maybe that wide, maybe 3 inches, 2 inches, somewhere in there.
I want to show you a photo. Your Honor, with the court's permission, I would like to show Exhibit 13. It's been previously marked. Do you see what's depicted in this photograph?
I do.
What does that appear to be, just generally?
The right rear taillight.
Of what?
The Lexus SUV.
Is that consistent with the black Lexus SUV that you saw at the Reed residence?
That was the black Lexus. That was not the taillight the day I was there.
Can you do me a favor, Mr. Wolk? With the court's permission, could we zoom in on the right rear taillight, please?
Okay.
Do you see the condition of that taillight as it's depicted in this photo?
I do.
Sergeant Barros, is this the condition of the right rear taillight when you showed up at the Reed household at around 3:15 in the afternoon on January 29th, 2022?
Absolutely not.
What's different about this photo, sir?
That taillight is completely smashed out.
Does it appear that there are additional pieces of taillight that are removed from this taillight condition than when you saw it at the Reed residence? Objection.
Sustained. Ask it differently, Mr. Jackson.
Of course. Describe specifically, other than the fact that it's different, describe in detail for the jurors what is different about this taillight as it's photographed here.
That middle section was intact when I was there. Towards that right side where that large chunk is, that's what was missing.
I'm going to hand you a green laser pointer. If you can, there's two displays, one monitor directly in front of you and one to your right. If you could use the one to your right, it's a little easier on the jurors. Describe what's different about that taillight.
Can you see that? So this area was intact. This is what I saw was missing here.
Well, there's a kind of a crack, which is, again, not really consistent with the Proctor, Buchanan, McCabe, Roberts description of the taillight. But Lally never asked him to describe it. Obviously, if Barros was going to be favorable to the DA a year ago, they would have shown him that picture and he would have said, oh, yeah, I was missing that piece. That would have been devastating testimony to the defense. Close to a knockout blow for them. He never did it. He never asked him to expand upon the condition of the taillight. So now here comes the defense. They don't even cross-examine him, obviously, because they don't know what he's going to say, that he said in trial too. And they get a little bit of favorable testimony, but they don't have the courage, which I agree with, to show a picture, because what if he says, yeah, it looked like that? They're screwed. Okay, fine. So he never gets asked. But he knows the case is over. He does watch the news. Whatever. Everybody watches the news. He knows that, wow, that taillight didn't look like the way it's been portrayed. So what happens between trial 1 and trial 2? Does anybody in the DA's office go to him? No. That doesn't really make a lot of sense. They don't even contact him. What does he do? Not only does he agree to talk to the defense, he goes to the hotel in Boston to meet with them. I mean, this guy is volunteering to testify. Okay, he has something to say that clear. I'll take a subpoena. I'll do this. On-duty cop. And he is now adamant that the taillight was not shattered, just that one piece. He obviously made a mistake about seeing the photo at trial. Not the biggest deal in the world, but, you know, he was wrong about that, no question. Very good cross by Brennan, by the way. But the point is, before you even get to the impact, how does anybody who does this for a living and understands how prosecutors interview witnesses, how they examine witnesses under oath, and again, I'm going to trial 1, how does anybody seriously believe that Adam Lally and others knew that Barros, if pressed, would torpedo the case and say what Proctor and Buchanan are saying about the taillight is not true?
And thank you to my favorite attorney, Mark Betterow, for pointing it out for all of us. Enough, enough, enough. There's no evidence. There's no evidence. There's no evidence. And the one piece of evidence that Hank Brennan thought he had locked down, that Karen Reed ran around saying she hit John O'Keefe, Dr. Marie Russell shot into outer space. That's gone. That has been substantially muted by that one sentence by Dr. Marie Russell.
She had, the defendant had undergone a very stressful event, finding her loved one in the snow. And so after a stressful event, many people suffer from what's called an acute grief reaction. It's very common. And they do things that seem to be irrational. They ramble. They act bizarrely. They make statements that are irrational, that don't make sense. And they oftentimes tend to blame themselves for whatever has happened. I've seen this many, many, many times in the emergency department.
who planted the seed of doubt that those statements by Karen Reed were a normal reaction to undergoing a traumatic event, the loss of her boyfriend, which they all saw with their own eyes watching the dash cam footage where she runs around like a psychopath and, oh yeah, is put into a hospital when her rights are taken away because she's on suicide watch. So that was the big stick that she effectively delivered up his you-know-what, which he has not recovered from. And if Karen Reed is acquitted, make no mistake, that moment by Dr. Marie Russell will be the turning point. That's the moment right there where the whole thing spun around. Because now he doesn't even get the I hit him statements, and he knows it. And he's pissed. And so now, what do people do when they're on a sinking ship? Doesn't bring out the best in us. No. It brings out the absolute worst. So what do? We lie, cheat, beg, borrow, and steal. And that is precisely what we are seeing from Hank Brennan today. And he has forgotten the one most important thing about being an attorney, that a jury is made up of 12 human beings. And if they don't like you, they are not going to support you. Everything you say is going to be painted with that broad brush of we don't like you. And now that we know you have outright lied to us in an egregious fashion where you tortured a man who we knew in our gut was telling us the truth, you have no credibility. Whatever modicum, small little teeny bit of credibility you used to have has been shot to shit and destroyed. And now we don't believe a word you say. We don't like you. And frankly, we don't want to hear another word from you. So now, from this point on, everything that happens is just bonus points for the defense. Now it's about burying the Commonwealth. From this moment on, unless they have infiltrated the jury and have a plant in that deliberation room, which is not impossible, because they will try, I have no doubt. They will try to tamper with the jury because these people are desperate and it is a sinking ship. The ship is sinking and desperate times call for desperate measures. Make no mistake. Don't be surprised if tomorrow or the next day, Hank Brennan comes in with a motion to get rid of a couple of the jurors because somebody heard them out at the bar talking about the case. Guaranteed. In fact, he's probably got a team of people right now at home stalking their Facebook and social media accounts to make sure that they're not engaging in misconduct, or that they don't have friends on their Facebook wall that they're close to that are following the case or posting about free Karen Reed. You watch. This ship is sinking and Hank Brennan is desperate. It's going to get ugly before it's over. But the jury does not like this man. I'm telling you, it is not possible. You know why it's not possible? Because he is the most unlikable person the world has ever seen. Guilty. She is not guilty. This man is a total piece of shit. I want to see him rot in hell. Let's get out of here. No. Big L for you. So if she is acquitted, I promise you it'll be because of one man and one man only. It'll be because of Hank Brennan and the fact that he is so unlikable, so blatantly corrupt, so flagrantly gaslighting, and everyone can see it. And because the judge is one of them, because she's on the side of the blue wall, she's on the blue wall side, she's going to lose these jurors too. And I can't wait until that comes and that jury is unleashed into the world and starts doing the Googling and going on YouTube and listening to people like me scream and yell about how fucking corrupt and evil so-called Judge Beverly Cannoni actually is, because they've had a front row seat for the last 2 months. Those poor souls. It's not okay. But I have to believe that when all is said and done, we may not get justice for John O'Keefe, at least not yet. But hopefully, thanks to Hank Brennan and maybe Dr. Marie Russell, maybe, just maybe, we will get justice for Karen Reed. Oh, no, wait. You haven't seen Dr. LaPosada yet. Just wait.
On the Darbert analysis regarding Dr. LaPosada being able to testify as to the dog bite wounds, I find that she is not qualified. I'm not satisfied that the Darbert requirements have been made.
Doctor, can you tell the jurors what you do for a living?
Yes, I'm a medical doctor and I subspecialize in forensic pathology.
How many times would you say you've qualified as an expert?
Over 40 years, maybe several hundred.
How about in Massachusetts?
That includes all of them.
Okay. Have you ever qualified? Let me list a couple of states. In Massachusetts?
Yes.
California?
Yes.
Connecticut?
Yes.
Delaware?
Yes.
Florida?
Yes.
Illinois?
Yes.
Maryland?
Yes.
Minnesota?
Yes.
Missouri?
Yes.
New York?
Yes.
Pennsylvania?
Yes.
Rhode Island?
Rhode Island, yes.
Have I left anything out?
Did you say Massachusetts?
I did.
Okay,
We
then you're
started
fine.
with Massachusetts.
Okay, you're fine.
What types of topics have you qualified to testify about as an expert forensic and anatomic pathologist?
Really anything that has to do with circumstances and cause of death. So it doesn't really matter, like, what type of injury or a sudden unexpected death. Usually it involves examination, study of information from the scene, information from the autopsy, police and investigation and medical records, and we put that all together and figure out the circumstances as to how someone died and why their body stopped functioning.
Can you summarize your professional background?
Certainly, I graduated in 1975 from Bucknell University with a Bachelor of Science in Biology. I went to University of Maryland School of Medicine, where I graduated in 1979 with a Doctor of Medicine. I did my internship and fellowship at Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore, where I studied anatomic pathology, which is the study of the diseases of the body. I then did my subspecialty fellowship in St. Louis in forensic pathology, which is understanding causes of death and injuries to the body.
Currently, are you a professor?
Yes, I am.
And tell us where you work.
I own my own independent consulting practice, and I'm also an associate professor at Brown University School of Medicine.
How long have you taught at Brown University School of Medicine?
Since 1993.
And how long have you been a clinical associate professor of pathology, either at Brown or before that?
Oh, gee, then that would have been since at least in the late 80s. I've been associate professors at the universities and medical schools where I've worked. I teach the second-year medical students. I teach a lecture in diseases of the heart.
Has there ever been a moment in your life, a decision maybe, where you just wish you could go back and do it over again? Where you realize that you just inserted your foot in your mouth in a way you can't ever take back. And I just hope that if you have been in that situation before, it wasn't on public display the way so-called Judge Beverly Cannoni's decisions were today. particularly her decision to rule that Dr. La Posada was not qualified to make a determination about the cause of John O'Keefe's injuries. Yeah, I'm thinking maybe this so-called judge probably wants that one back.
In 1999, the Egypt Air 990 took off from New York airport, and it crashed off the coast of Massachusetts, and 2,065 passengers died. And because of the force of the airplane going into the water, all the bodies were fragmented. So all the fragments were brought to my medical examiner's office. They actually vacuumed the ocean floor, and we had 2,600 some fragmented remains from that airplane crash, and that involved working with FBI, TSA to identify those individuals and understand exactly why they died.
What was your role and the role of your staff that you supervised in dealing with those other government agencies, the FBI, the NTSA, other entities, in terms of the fatalities that you did review as a medical examiner, or the chief medical examiner of Rhode Island?
Well, I dealt with families from around the globe who had relatives on that flight, and then the FBI was looking into what may have caused the crash. The Egyptian government, who owned the airplane, was also there and interested in understanding what happened. A society that is for people who practice anatomic pathology and understand how to interpret laboratory results and biopsies.
Did you become a fellow in 1991 until present for that organization?
Yes.
What's the difference between a member and a fellow?
A member is a lower level, and then you can be promoted to fellow if the board of directors feels that you've contributed in your field.
And were you associated with the College of American Pathologists?
Yes.
Were you a fellow there as well?
Yes.
What about the World Association for Medical Law?
Yes.
What about the American Association for Clinical Chemistry?
Yes, I'm a member.
Rhode Island Medical Women's Association, what is that?
Well, it's basically what it says. It's women doctors in Rhode Island.
Were you elected to the board of directors for that organization?
Yes.
Ultimately, were you elected as the president of that organization?
I was.
Rhode Island Medical Society, what is that?
It's an organization of doctors who practice in Rhode Island.
Are you a council member there?
Yes.
Pennsylvania Association of Pathologists, what about that?
Yes, when I practiced in Pennsylvania, I was a member of that organization.
Did you, in addition to be a member there, did you also hold a chaired position? Were you the chairman for the Committee on Forensic Pathology?
Yes.
Have you served on any editorial boards of any scholarly journals or publications? Tell me about that.
I've reviewed articles submitted for the Journal of Forensic Sciences and the National Association of Medical Examiner journals.
Did you also hold an editorial position for the American Journal of Forensic Medicine and Pathology?
Yes.
Is that one of the medical journals that is used throughout the country by other medical professionals, other medical examiners?
Yes.
It's a resource?
Yes.
And a text?
Correct. Yeah, I've written chapters in textbooks about medical legal death investigation and forensic pathology. And so I published 22 papers, and I've written several chapters.
I find that she is not qualified. I'm not satisfied that the Daubert requirements have been made. Specifically, not just the experience, but the reliability of the methodology she used and how it was applied.
Well, in order to arrive at a conclusion of how somebody dies and what the cause of death is, we have to put all our facts out, and then we say, how could these facts have come to be? So it's called like a differential diagnosis.
Dr. La Posada, have you ever exercised wound pattern recognition in your position as a forensic pathologist? Or do you do it every time?
All the time.
Have you ever taught any courses or given lectures on wound identification and wound pattern recognition?
Yes, it's part of understanding blunt force trauma, sharp force trauma, gunshot wounds. They all make injury patterns on the body that the pathologist can then relate to what caused that injury.
With regard to the case that's before us,
Judge Beverly Cannoni is one of them.
I observed that he had evidence of blunt force trauma to the back of his head.
Are those injuries consistent with a particular type or pattern of patterned injury?
Yes.
Describe that for us, please.
There, in the back of his head, a little bit to the right-hand side, was a horizontal tearing of the scalp, and that's called a laceration. And surrounding that were linear scrapes that were vertical in orientation. So that is an injury pattern. And then you have to think, well, what could cause that injury pattern? And so then you go from there.
Did you also, in addition to looking at, by the way, how did you make that assessment about the injury? Was it photographs?
Yes.
Is that a normal way for a forensic pathologist to make an assessment? Is that an acceptable methodology to make an assessment of a wound pattern by the use of anatomical photographs?
Oh, absolutely.
Have you done it before?
Oh, hundreds of times.
What is a coup contra coup injury?
Oh, it's a very interesting, peculiar injury to the head. When you have a blow to the head, the blow can either be the stationary head and there's a blow to it, or you can have the head that's moving and gets the blow. So looking at a pattern of coup contra coup helps the forensic pathologist differentiate that. A coup contra coup injury examines the coup, which is where the impact occurred, and then we look at what's 180 degrees opposite that impact, and that's called the contra coup, or like opposite the coup. And that injury pattern helps us determine whether a person was just having a fixed head and somebody hit it, or whether the head was just standing and went down to the ground. The coup contra coup of a falling or being pushed backward has injury patterns where the impact occurred, but then there's also injury patterns 180 degrees opposite from that. And that happens because the brain is floating in cerebral spinal fluid, and when the head comes down, the brain is a little bit behind, so you get the bang on the back of the head, but then because the brain is floating, it hits the inside of the opposite side of the head. And so that makes the contra coup pattern, and that tells us that there's been a fall backwards and hitting the head.
Is that consistent, a coup contra, just in general, a coup contra coup injury, consistent with a linear acceleration of the head by a fall, an unbroken fall straight back?
Correct. There's also some angular force in that as well.
Understood. In order to determine whether or not Mr. O'Keefe suffered from a coup contra coup injury, can that be done by a gross examination, or does it have to be surgical?
We would look at, well, first we look at the outside, but then we have to look at injuries to the scalp, and we look at the skull, see where the skull fractures are, and in particular to look at the brain and see where the damage is to the brain. And there should, in a fall backwards, you have damage to the brain at the site of impact, but you also have damage to the brain 180 degrees opposite from that. And that tells you it's a fall backwards.
In the case before us, dealing with John O'Keefe, were you able to look at the scalp and the injuries associated with the scalp from a gross perspective?
Yes.
Were you also able to look at the skull and possible fractures that Mr. O'Keefe suffered on his skull?
Yes.
And what about the brain? Did you have evidence of a dissection such that you could see the brain and determine whether or not there was a coup contra coup injury associated with the brain?
Yes, I had a full examination of the brain available.
Were Mr. O'Keefe's head injuries consistent with a coup contra coup injury?
Yes.
Could you describe that, specifically his head injuries, to the jurors, please?
Well, as we say, he has a pattern head injury on the back of his scalp, where there is a tearing of the scalp, and then vertically above that, there is some little areas of scraping to the skin. So that tells me that Mr. O'Keefe went backwards onto something that had a little ridge, but it also had some irregularity to it to cause the different scrapes before you get to the tearing of the scalp. Then when we look at the skull, he had massive skull fractures that originated starting in the back of his head. They came around to the front. They went under the base of his brain, under the skull, under the base of the brain, and it came into the front of the skull at the orbital plates and fractured that, and that caused some bleeding in his upper eyelids. When the brain was examined inside the brain, I could see that the brain had become swollen and parts of it had herniated or moved down the area where the spinal cord is, and that's called brainstem herniation, and that is why the brain stops functioning and why your body stops functioning when you have a severe head injury.
You indicated that the wound pattern suggested a ridge or ledged surface.
Yes.
Could you explain that in more detail, please?
Yes. So if I were looking at it, I would see the break in the scalp. Then I would see several sort of irregularly placed scrapes of the skin that kind of look like pencil marks. And so that means that something with granularity he hit first, then it moved up a little, broke the scalp, and then moved on a little bit above that.
Would you expect to see that if Mr. O'Keefe had fallen backward onto a perfectly flat surface?
No, it has to be a surface that has some small ridges in it to make those little vertical patterns.
Dr. Laposada, what is ecchymosis?
Ecchymosis is a medical term for bruise.
Did you see any ecchymosis on Mr. O'Keefe that he suffered as a result of the coup contre coup injury to the back of his head?
He had a bruise on his brain, at the back of the brain and at the front of the brain.
What would the outer, let me rephrase that. What would you see around his eyes regarding ecchymosis?
Yes, when you have, when the brain slaps forcefully against the base of the skull, the delicate bones above the eye break, and that's again the coup contre coup, where the brain slaps forward. And when those delicate bones are broken, there's bleeding, and that bleeding then goes right down into the upper eyelids. So it kind of looks like you have black eyes, but there's not been any punch to the face. It's only come from the skull fracture. That's sometimes called raccoon eyes, because you look like a little raccoon.
Did you see any skin injury to either one of Mr. O'Keefe's upper eyelids?
Yes, he had a small kind of slit-like defect horizontal on his right upper eyelid.
Would the ecchymosis on its own produce that type of injury, that laceration over his right eye?
No, the blood seeping down into his upper eyelids was from the skull fractures.
Was the laceration above his eyelid on the right side a separate injury altogether?
Yes, it was.
Based on your training experience, do you have an opinion as to whether or not what that eyelid laceration might be consistent with?
Some application of force which broke the skin.
Could that be from an object?
Possible.
Could it be from a fist?
Possible.
Sustain us to the floor, Mr. Jackson.
Give me some possibilities of what might cause that laceration above his right eyelid.
So it's not possibilities.
Give me, in your opinion, what you believe could have caused or produced the injury to the upper right eyelid.
God save the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
I live inside my own world of make-believe. Kids screaming in the cradles, profanities. I see the world through ice covered in ink and bleach. Cross out the ones who heard my cries and watched me weep. I love everything.